Welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling a story that's been drilled into us for literally decades about dietary fat and heart disease. We're going to completely dismantle that classic health myth, and I'll walk you through exactly how our blood vessels actually work from a much more scientifically sound perspective. Let's just dive right in.
Here's our agenda for today. First, we'll hit the old plumbing myth. Second, we'll look at why arteries are definitely not pipes. And finally, we'll break down the real causes of plaque.
All right, part one, the old plumbing myth.
For years, the mainstream medical view basically treated the human body like a simple machine. I mean, if the heart was the pump, well, then the blood vessels were just the plumbing, right? And looking through that super mechanical lens, it became way too easy to make these broad, sweeping assumptions about how our cardiovascular system might break down.
Think about it. For a whole generation, dietary guidelines were ruled by one core assumption. Eating animal fat blocks blood vessels like grease in a water pipe. The logic went that floating fats just sort of stick to the sides of our blood vessels, right? And eventually they clog them up completely, exactly like hot grease solidifying and ruining your kitchen sink.
Now, honestly, this logical chain sounds highly reasonable. It actually makes perfect intuitive sense. If you've ever had to call a plumber to, snake out a kitchen drain that's choked up with cooking oil, you can instantly visualize that process. We literally transferred that everyday household annoyance directly onto our internal biology. It gave us a totally simple, visible cause and effect that anyone could just immediately grasp.
So it's completely understandable why this belief got so deeply rooted in the public consciousness. It gave us a clear enemy, dietary fat, and a very clear mechanical failure to picture in our heads. But, well, here's the thing. When something makes this much intuitive sense, it takes careful scientific observation to realize that the intuitive answer is actually the wrong answer.
Which brings us to part two. Arteries are not pipes.
This is exactly where the old myth completely falls apart. Think about a copper water pipe for a second. It's an inanimate, rigid metal tube. It's literally dead space that just contains whatever flows through it, passively letting debris build up. But a human artery, that is a profoundly complex, living, breathing tissue. They aren't passive containers at all. They're incredibly active participants in your biology.
Let's define exactly what we're talking about here. The arterial wall is a totally unique, dynamic, living structure. The innermost lining of your blood vessels is made up of a layer of highly active cells. These cells are in constant communication with your blood. They're expanding, contracting, responding to nutrients, hormones, and stress signals. They are alive. They aren't just slick metal or plastic waiting for some rogue grease to stick to them.
And because our bodies are wonderfully complex living systems, the whole basic premise of that plumbing clog myth is just flawed right from the start. You simply cannot compare the passive buildup of waste in an inanimate tube to the dynamic biological processes of a living, breathing human vessel. It's an apples and oranges comparison.
Moving on to part three, real causes of plaque.
Because of the artery's unique living structure, the idea that fat passively coats the walls is, frankly, scientifically inaccurate. The whole assumed logic falls apart right out of the gate. Plaque doesn't just sit on top of the lining like rust in a pipe. It actually develops inside the wall of the artery itself.
So here is the actual biological reality. Step 1, the living arterial wall reacts to its environment. If the blood flowing past it carries inflammatory signals or causes metabolic stress, well, the living cells of the artery wall get irritated and damaged. Step 2, in response to that damage, your body tries to heal itself. Plaque forms as a complex biological immune response to the injury. It's actually a protective healing process gone wrong within the living wall itself. It's deeply tied to our overall metabolic health rather than just being a passive clog of grease.
Okay, so if dietary fat passively clogging our pipes isn't the true enemy here, what is? Well, the real pathogenic factors that irritate that delicate living lining of your blood vessels are things like chronic inflammation, severe blood sugar imbalances, and overall metabolic stress. These are the actual culprits that kick off the biological response that eventually forms plaque. The real story here is about how your whole metabolic system is functioning, not just about avoiding one specific macronutrient.
Now, this shift in perspective, I think it's absolutely wonderful news. Knowing that your arteries are responsive tissues means you actually have the power to actively support them. By focusing on healthy metabolic habits, managing your blood sugar and reducing chronic inflammation through a balanced lifestyle, you create an optimal environment for those living walls. It completely frees you from just worrying about, quote-unquote, clogging them.
Your body is brilliant. It's alive, and it's constantly responding to its environment.
So, knowing that heart health is deeply rooted in metabolic function and not just simple plumbing, I'll leave you with this. How will you support your living arteries today? Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep questioning those old myths, and I'll see you next time.